Today I just got my Canon R5 Mark II. I'm going to walk you through as I set it up for portraits. Let's get to it. Welcome back, and thank you to everyone who stayed subscribed to the channel. It's been a few years and I hope to get pushing out some more content here soon. Today though, I thought I'd share, I just received the Canon R5 Mark II. I've never powered it on, and I just spent the last couple hours charging the battery because they ship with a dead battery. I thought I would go through how I set up my cameras, and it might give you some ideas on how you might want to do the same with yours. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So I've never turned this on, and let's see if I flip it on here. All right, it looks like it's outputting the HDMI okay, which one nice thing of the R5 II is now it has a full-size HDMI port. Okay, let's just go ahead and start the setup here. So I want English, and let's see, it is currently August 22nd. So we'll go here, August 22nd, 2024. It is 12:25. p.m. And then I am in mountain time, so we'll go to the zone. What we want, -7. So Denver, and hit OK, and we'll hit OK. And for now, we'll skip connecting to a smartphone. That's something I'll play with later. But okay, there we go. We're now in here, and now I'm going to press the menu button. Actually, first things first, let me just switch it into manual mode, because usually you don't get all the menu options if you're not in manual mode. Okay, so now let's just go ahead and we'll start going through the menu here and start changing some settings. It looks like some settings have changed different compared to, I'm coming from the R5 Mark I, and then I also did have the original R6 at one point. So some of these settings might be on some of the newer Canon cameras, but I am not used to those, so we'll just kind of go through and see what we get. But we'll start here with the image size and type. So I have been using the Canon compact RAW format for the last 5 years, and I've not run into any issues where I've found it to be a problem in wanting to use regular RAW. Some people can say that they do see a difference in pulling up shadows and things. I would just say do your own testing and see, but as far as my work and everything, I'm good with the compact RAW, and I get smaller file sizes, so that, you know, helps with your storage. And things like that. And then I typically just shoot the compact RAW. I don't even use JPEG or HEIF, but that's an option too, which can be handy if you want a backup that just, you know, has a JPEG as well. So I'm going to set JPEG to none, and then leave the cropping to full. This quality option is new, but where I'm not using JPEG or HEIF, I'm not even gonna mess with that. And so let's move over to the next tab. Let's see here. Most of this stuff I usually just leave normal. Let's see, metering mode. Yeah, we'll leave that at evaluative. Okay, so everything there, at least out of the box, I'm just going to leave the same. We'll see as I start using the camera. But then picture style, I usually use standard, especially where I'm, you know, doing stuff with RAW. Yep, that menu I leave pretty much the same. White balance, I usually do change this. I mean, a lot of the times I'm doing studio stuff, so I'll just leave it on flash. And then I'll change white balance, you know, as I as needed, depending on, depending on lighting conditions. And that looks like the only one I changed there. That one, multiple exposure and focus bracketing, those would be special use cases. So right now, leave those as disabled. Drive mode, I usually leave my drive mode in single shot. This obviously depends on, if you were shooting sports, then you'd want to go into the, the high speed modes. I usually set up a button, which we'll do later on, so that way I can get to the drive mode and change as needed. But for the most part, I'm always in the single shot drive mode. Let's see. And then for the shutter mode, for flash work and studio, I usually leave it in mechanical. Although I am curious to try out the electronic shutter on this with some sports style stuff. Let's see, assist shooting. That's default. And then for now, so the exposure simulation, I usually will turn that off if I'm doing studio work because of where I'm using flash. To make it easier to focus, I can use the ambient light to focus, but that way, if I put in the settings for shooting in flash, the screen would be completely dark, and so you wouldn't even be able to see what you're photographing. And then I also add a quick way to change this, so that way if I'm not in a studio environment, then it's nice to have the exposure simulation on, so then you have an idea through the viewfinder of what the exposure actually looks like as you're changing settings, which is one of the great things about mirrorless. Okay. That would be the only thing I changed there. Let's see, shooting info display. For now, we'll just leave those as the default. Display frame rate. This is personal choice. If you want to be more power efficient, there's the power saving mode, but then the screen will dim and it will kind of go to a slower frame rate. I typically leave it on smooth unless I am in a situation where I'm hoping to get, pull more from the battery. And that looks good there. Okay, autofocus. So now we're in the, right now it's just strictly manual because I don't have a lens attached. The autofocus area, which we have, there's some new options here with these little locks, and it looks like that turns off subject detect. So I'm hoping to set up a custom button here in a little bit. So I'll be able to quickly move between a probably whole area AF and then to a spot one without subject detection, so that way I can focus on, like, say for a detail shot of an object or something like that. And then we'll leave whole area servo on. Okay. Subject to detect. There's a bunch of new options now, but I'm going to leave it on people because that's mostly what I'm photographing. Eye detection, I'll leave it on auto for now too. And then that's a new option with registering people, but for now I don't have any people to register. I'm going to leave the case on auto, but you can fine tune that as to if you want the focus to be more sticky on a subject. Or what else is the option? Tracking sensitivity, and then also if the subject is moving really fast, you can kind of tweak that. And we'll just have to see as I start playing with the camera whether or not I would keep, want to fine tune that, or if the auto works great. Okay. Servo first image priority. That's something new I might have to dig in the manual about. Okay, for now I'm going to leave all those settings on the same. Limit autofocus areas. Okay, so this is, something that I would do is I'm going to turn off basically everything but the whole area. and probably the spot. And by doing this, later on when I set up a custom button to change the autofocus selection, I'll be able to just switch between those two, and those are the two modes I use the most. I mean, obviously, you know, if you use different modes, you could keep those enabled. But what you can then do is push a button on the back of the camera, and it will then cycle between the ones that are checked. And so by just doing this, now I can quickly just hit a button and change between one spot focus to whole area tracking. Okay, so let's click OK. Orientation link point, that's fine. Limit subject to detect. I want to leave, I think this again, you could set up a button or some way to quickly switch between the subject, but for now I'm going to just leave those the same. Although mostly I am photographing people, so I'd probably want to just do people and auto. And then limit, which I think what I would want to do is turn those off and just have auto and off. And so that way I again use a button, custom button I'll show in a little bit of that you can turn eye detection on or off. But when it's on auto, you should be able to pick which eye with the joystick. Okay. Manual focus peaking settings. I don't do manual focus very much. That is nice though. I've played with it and you get a nice, you know, red border around, which we'll go ahead and turn that on just that way in the event I am using it. But yeah, you get a red border around what's in focus, which is really, really handy if you're ever doing manual focus. And that should be it there. Okay, file operation. This is some of the new stuff in here, but I don't think there's anything in here that I would change. Network settings. This is all mostly the app and network and Bluetooth stuff. Okay. So now this is where we would set up to record using both card slots, which this I use all the time. So let me go back just so you can see that option. So it's the very first thing that says record function plus card folder selection. So you go in there and we're going to this is strictly focused on photo. So we'll go to the record options here for photo. Right now it's on standard, but what I want is redundancy. And so the way to do that would be to go down to record to multiple. And so now every time I take a photo, it will record to both cards. So I have a SD card and a CF Express card in here and it will go to both. And that's mainly it. But you know, if you want to do other options for video or things like that, you can go through and tweak that. Okay, that looks good. Date and time zone, we did all that. All that's good. Reset, save the load. I mean, after I'm all done, usually what I will do is I will save a copy of the settings to the card, which is this option here. And then I can store those on a computer, and so that way, in the event that something happens that I have to reset the camera, or maybe it breaks and I have to rent one, or just loan another, you know, rent another R5 Mark II, I can then load those settings from the card, and that camera will automatically have all this stuff set up without having to do it again. The thing that I'd change in here is the copyright information. So you can enter in the author's name. So this is me. This goes much faster when you have the touch screen, but where I'm using HDMI, I can't, I have to do it with the joystick. But let me do that really quick. And then in here I usually put my actual company name, so that way I've got the author and the company. I'm going to skip that for now just because of the time, but what that does is that then every time you take a photo, it embeds your name into the RAW files, which is nice. And then, now this is a new menu, which, okay, so here's the custom buttons and dials. So we'll go into custom buttons. One of the things I like to do is change the multifunction mode. I will change this to the drive mode, so that way I can quickly change from the single shot to high-speed continuous mode. Let's see. There it is right there. So now if I go back, and now if I push that button, now I can quickly change between the different drive modes. So that's one that I like to do there. The next setting that I like to change is for the little star button here. I usually change that for the eye detection, so I can turn it off and on. So there's that button there. I've got that set, and so now if I go back, and now if I push that button, you can see it turns eye detection off and to auto. And if I left the other things checked, then I'd also be able to cycle through left eye or right eye along with auto and off. So that's something I'll have to play with and see if I prefer one way or the other. The last button that I also configure is the AF point button, which is right next to that, the star button. And I change that to the direct AF area selection button. And so by doing that, now if I go back, which I actually threw a lens on here in between takes, now when I push that button, I can go to a single autofocus point and use it like a traditional DSLR. Like I said, this is perfect for like the detail shots. And this is where I limited those focus modes. And then I push it again, and now it goes into the whole area focus with tracking. And then I push it again, and tracking is turned off, and I can just focus on one point, which is great, you know, if you're doing a detail shot, like if you're a wedding photographer and you're doing details of rings or, you know, various things like that, it's perfect. And then as far as that goes, that is, let's see, there's one other button that I've changed as well, which is on the lens. This one here on the RF lenses, they have a button on the side. And what I like to do with that one is I will change that to the crop mode. There we go. Okay, so that's it as far as the custom buttons go. You can also control, you know, customize the dials and the control rings. I use that as just the default. Okay, so that's pretty much everything on that screen. Touch and drag, I do like to turn this on. And what this is you're using the viewfinder. You can then now use the back of the touch screen to move your focus point around, which I find that faster than using the joystick. And then I change the focus area to the left, the active area, because I am a left eye shooter. So the left side of the screen is, my face is less likely to touch, and then that way I can move my finger right in that area. Those I would just leave as the default. Oh, this is the new eye control thing. I look forward to playing with this feature because I haven't ever tried it on the R3. But, I would just leave that standard for now. And I think all of these right now I would leave it default. Yep, so that's it for the basic settings. Now, the other thing that I like to do is set up the My Menu tab, which I actually took some screenshots just so that way I could remember from my phone. But what this does is give you quick access to menu items that you would maybe use a lot. So like I mentioned earlier, I usually turn off exposure simulation if I'm in the studio, and then I turn it back on if I'm outside. So that's the first thing I like to have at the top of my menu tab. So I click Add and then Configure, select items to register, and then now, let's see if we can find it here. This has so many things that you can put to the menu. But there we go, display simulation, because yeah, they've changed the name of it. So, okay. And so now, if I go back on the menu, you can see that's there, and now I can quickly change the simulation. And then the other thing I like to do, so every time before I start a shoot, I like to reformat my memory cards, so that's the other one that I put on there. There we go, format card, okay. And then I also like to do white balance, which I think. Okay. Subject to detect. Okay, I've gone through and I've went ahead and added some of the ones that I typically use, so I'll explain this really quick. So we've got the display simulation, so I can quickly jump. So if I'm in the studio, I want that off. If I go outside, I'll quickly turn on exposure simulation, and now the viewfinder will show me the represented exposure based on the camera settings. I've got format card, so that way I can quickly reformat my card just before I begin a shoot. White balance, I can quickly jump through a white balance setting. You know, if I go outside, I can quickly change to daylight, or, you know, even do Kelvin, depending on what I feel like doing. I can quickly change the subject to detect from here, so I can jump to people, to animals, to vehicles, or none. I can also change the shutter mode. So I usually, like I said, I'm in studio, so I do mechanical mostly. But then if I want to quickly jump to electronic, if I'm photographing an event where I don't want the shutter sound, I will do that. And then the last one, this is on some of the newer cameras, which I've played with this on the R50, but you can choose your USB connection apps. And so the default is, so it can do photo import, so you can actually connect directly to Lightroom on like an iPhone with USB-C and import the photos right in that way. But then you also have the option of changing it to a video call mode, so that way you can connect it to a laptop and it will detect it as a webcam. And then here's the Canon apps for iPhone, so if you're going to use any of the Canon apps, Canon Camera Connect, that's what it is. If you're going to use that, then you'd want to switch it to this to be able to connect it to your iPhone. And one nice thing is that you can now use the USB connection on the R5 Mark II, where you couldn't do that. You can only do it with Wi-Fi on the R5. So that gives you a little bit more stable of a connection, although you have to deal with a cable at that point. So that's my basic setup of the R5 Mark II. I'm looking forward to getting to put this camera through its paces and into action, and I hope I can create some videos of some shoots at some point. And I hope that this video was helpful, and appreciate the subscribes to the channel, and go out there and get shooting.